Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Oakland Museum of California. This is a safe space. You can clap. It's totally okay. I give you full permission. So my name is Renee Levesque. I am one of the programmers on the No Spectators exhibition on the Oakland Museum side. As many of you know, this exhibition has been on quite a journey, and it's very exciting. So if you have already been to the galleries, you already know the fabulous glory of it. And if you have not, we really encourage you to go into the gallery after the talk, because I think you'll have a very fresh perspective on the art that you're seeing. We're going to get started with a really quick video, and then we'll introduce you to the founders and we'll get going. Thank you so much for being here. All right, and if you'll all please join me in welcoming the Burning Man founders and our moderator for this afternoon, Andie Grace.
Hi, everybody. How are you doing? My name is Andie Grace, and I am with Burning Man again after many years away. I started volunteering for Burning Man in 1998. Started working there full-time in 2000, worked there till 2012, left for a while, and now I'm back. And it's great to be here today. Thanks for coming. I'd like to welcome to the stage Burning Man's cultural founders. You guys want to come on up? So from that side to this side, we have Mikel, Harley Dubois, Will Roger Peterson, and Crimson Rose. So before we get started, I always like to do this. How many of you in the audience identify as a burner? Okay. Now, how many of you have actually been to Black Rock City? It's not always the same people. And what about you're Burning Man curious, but you haven't been yet? All right. Excellent. Great mix. Well, when people think of the words Burning Man, they're often thinking of Black Rock City, but it actually encompasses a whole universe of experiences out there, including hundreds of outposts all over the world, civic activities and actions and disaster work and almost I think 100 regional events out there. So Burning Man means a lot of things more than just Black Rock City. And what we say today really means a whole lot more. It's a much larger story. But I remember our late founder, Larry Harvey, used to refer to something called the Burning Man Project for many years before we actually started the nonprofit. And so I remember that and kind of thinking that meant that the city was really just one manifestation of kind of a larger experiment. So we're here to talk about that today. I want to ask everybody, and you can kind of jump in, when you first encountered this, what was it about Burning Man that made you want to devote your life to it? Or did you know you were going to be devoting your life to it at the time?
Definitely did not know.
No.
Well, I first ran into Burning Man. I heard about some people who were going to go down to the beach in San Francisco and burn this wooden figure. And it was on the solstice, so I figured, it was some kind of pagan thing. But I went anyway and found out it was just a kind of Dada art project of creation and destruction by Larry Harvey and Jerry James. And that was the beginning for me, and it just grew from there.
I think we were just drawn to the desert, when we were creating the city. It's so funny when you see the archives and everything. It's like we were so busy doing it, we didn't realize what we were doing, except that felt like, at least for me, that I had to be there, that there was something that was pulling me to this amazing landscape.
Yeah, I felt the same way. Back in 1991 was the first year I physically went. I helped people prepare the year before. And when I got there, when it was all over, I thought about it and went, you know what? I don't know what's happening. I don't know what that thing was, but whatever it was, there was something really special. And I just need to do that again.
Yeah, for me, the place itself, as you guys mentioned, it was very important. It was the largest flat expanse in North America. And there's a change in your perspective of who you are and your place in the universe, the sky. Back then, there wasn't as many lights in Black Rock City as there are today. So at night, you could see the Milky Way. You could see the meteors. And so the place itself, and then Mother Nature was strong there. There was, the first windstorm, everybody turned tan. So it kind of took gender and other issues out, right? Everybody looked the same. Your costume that might have been brightly colored was now tan. And I kind of like that because it created this sense of equality in everyone, in the way that we went about our human connection, which was really strong there. I think the human connection, because of the weather, because of the place, actually percolates to the surface in a way that doesn't happen in the default world. That's what attracted me, and that's what kept me going. The idea that we were pranksters, that was part of it. We played, games with each other, and it brought out a creative spirit that isn't really allowed in, again, the default world. And I think that is still happening today. You go there and you feel differently about what you're doing and the artwork that you're making. And you do it for a different reason. You do it for gifting. You do the art not to put in a gallery like it is here, which is really odd for me to see art stuff in a gallery. But early on, you saw people doing things with their camps that made you feel like there was creation going on. So those are the things that kept me going. At first, though, like everyone else, we had no idea.
My pivotal point was 1993, and the camp had come together, and I looked out at all this, and I saw the fires, and I said, this means something. There's something going on here, and it's significant. And that's when I really focused on Burning Man.
And Harley, I want to direct this question to you first, because there were those eras where it was kind of a camp out with friends, and people would return every year. But then at a certain point, by necessity, it had to become a city. So what was that like when you suddenly had to pivot and turn into a city planner?
Well, it was really challenging. It was unexpected. We found out the hard way that 10,000 people is too many people to have chaos reign. 1996 was a very scary, rough year, and I came back from it thinking, I'm not going back. And Larry did some hard thinking and said, what if we put in a city grid? And I'm like, oh yeah, then we wouldn't have issues with like emergency people. I mean, if there's an emergency, the medical people can find people. So we need a city grid. And then I was like, but we have to get people to stop driving. So driving is terrifying. To see people just driving anywhere. There was no rules. So we made a city grid. We put the art outside and not in the city grid. We got street names, and we just wung it. And the wonderful thing about Burning Man is that when you do it for a week out of every year, you can come back and learn your lessons and go back and improve things. So we learned by doing. And through the years, I met city planners, and I was like, yeah, it seems like the average good distance from corner to corner is about 300 feet. And they're like, yeah, that's what I learned in school, 300 feet. And I'm like, how did you learn that? I said, because people would complain there was walking too long, they were walking too far, and there wasn't enough cool stuff to see, or that everything was so cramped, even though the spaces were relatively the same, but it's just human nature, there's a scale. And we just learned the hard way.
And Will, what about using construction to build those things in the middle of nowhere?
You know, a couple of interesting things happened almost by chance that I think righted the ship and caused us to go down the stream together. And that was in '96, Harley mentioned that it was a very dangerous, scary year. And we all walked away feeling the lack of energy to want to even do it again. I mean, it was like, you know.
Terrifying.
It was terrifying. And then in '97, we couldn't get a permit to do the event on BLM land. And I had previously agreed to do desert operations, not knowing what was about to happen. So we found private land at the Fly Ranch to do the event in '97. And along with that came the requirement that we had to apply for the festival permit, the Washoe County Festival permit. And in it, they had 105 things that we needed to comply with, which we had never thought about before. And it had to do with streets and roads, separating the campground from the art. It had to do with providing maps and plans of emergency services. It had to do with street signs. A funny story about the street signs is we'd never made street signs before. Now they're like iconic. They're part of the Burning Man experience. And I didn't check the guy that was doing them, and I looked at it, it all looked great. We put the street signs up, and they were only named on one side. So we were learning. We were learning how to be city planners, city managers, how to do construction. We had our first real cafe that year, was built by the late Bob Stahl. There was a bunch of new things, including getting a business license. It's the first time we had applied for a business license. It's the first time we had a large porta potty contract. The first time we had, again, streets and signs and roads and a separate campground and an orderly map and plan that Harley could work with to do city planning and create the adjacency effect that you've done so magic with over the years in placing the theme camps. So the huge transition for me was from '96, which was a camp out with friends, kind of loosely organized around cacophony and chaos and anarchy in many ways. Those were the main operative things in Burning Man before '97. In '97, we had to become a business, and we had to be professional, and we had to provide services. And that was all new, and we were making it up as we went along. So
I think that's correct. I always think of that. It's like, we would try something, and if it worked, we would do it again. If it didn't, going, oh my God, let's don't do that. And what other companies actually would take that risk to let's reinvent something every year? It's somewhat crazy.
And I think it's our greatest strength, actually, is our ability to fail and learn and
Yeah.
get it better.
Yeah.
I think everybody who's a Burning Man, that's part of the experience.
Yep.
Another thing we learned in '97, too, was the importance of controlling our boundary. In '97, there was a natural barrier around us because of our location. There was only 3 roads in, and we realized how important it was to control access.
it was the first time we had an actual gate that worked.
Yes.
And people actually had to go through the gate instead of wave as they
They
drove
just
by at
drive
high
around.
speed. So that was an interesting thing.
Yes.
You know, two important things happened that year for me, and I'll just mention them. One was Rod Garrett drew the first city design, and we still use his design today. And the other one is 6 people came together to form a company that made the business viable. And it was more than that year. I think there was 8 people, and then the next year it became the 6 people that are called the cultural founders, 4 of them that are here. So those are the 2 important milestones, I think, in our journey together.
Yep. Let's talk about art. Crimson. What is it about the place, the setting, the natural setting? Talk to us about the elements of Burning Man art, and does that export to a place like this?
Well, as Will was saying, it is the largest flat expanse in North America. It's 400 square miles of what appears to be a barren landscape, but there was something about that freedom where you could do just about anything that you wanted to do. And one person would do one thing, and then 5 more would go, oh my God, if they did that, I could do.
Right.
And I think it actually showed the potential within themselves that they could try crazy things, that really pushing the edge. The aspect that's very different about Rock City, it's about the interactivity, where you are allowed to interact with the artwork. Not only that, but that the human element becomes part of the artwork. I remember David Best, who started creating the temples, actually was saying, you know, if it wasn't for the people, I would just be making pretty art. It is so important, and I think that really changes the aspect that people are allowed to play with something, to climb it, to push a button and something happens. And that to me is very free. And I also almost got arrested for touching art outside in Seattle. I'm an art toucher, what can I say? Where you're actually, I mean, we're told don't touch it, don't go next to it, there's a stand-in, there's a velvet rope, and you're gonna stay away from it. But being able to get close to the artwork, to climb on it, to write your name on something, then it actually, with the temple, it belongs to everybody. It's not just the artist and their ego and the crew. They're giving it to a community. And to me, that's much more valuable, much, much bigger. So we are attempting to actually infiltrate and take the artwork out into the world. Now, some artwork won't last for more than a week. I mean, it was always about temporality, putting something up and seeing how long it actually would last. But some of the artwork, as the artists have been honing their skills, are putting that artwork out in the world, and it's now affecting people in other ways as well.
Black Rock City really is a place where people feel kind of empowered to share those kinds of gifts. And Harley, you've really been a standard bearer for volunteerism at Burning Man and making people feel invited to participate, and it's become a super rooted part of the culture. Do you remember when you realized that that was so critical to this experience, and kind of what's the secret sauce of getting people to feel that?
Well, we wouldn't be here if we were all volunteers. We all started off as volunteers. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for everyone's sweat equity. In the beginning, I mean, for so long we were unpaid and had to do other full-time jobs. I'm hardwired and like who I am, just to my family. I come from a long line of ministers and stuff. So I'm all about people. I've always been all about people. And it was very apparent to me very quickly at Burning Man, probably by 1997 was a pretty seminal year, probably about by 97, that a leadership role is a gift that's given to you. The community will accept you as a leader, because you run more effectively if you have a leader, because you can make decisions faster, but you have to trust that person, so you have to earn that position. And that's the only way it works. And that position is not any more important than any other position. Your tire kicker, or the person who always challenges you, is just as important as the person who tries to make the decision, because they're challenging you to make a better decision. or the person that keeps everybody happy and makes sure everyone deals with their stuff and talks to each other and works it out. That's just as important. So that group dynamic becomes very starkly clear when you're at some place with 30-mile-an-hour winds and things that could kill you and dust everywhere, the great equalizer, everyone looks the same and you're exhausted and challenging yourself and dehydrated. These things become very apparent. So it was very early on, and I think the secret sauce would be staying true to those roots. Like, it hasn't changed. People are people. They're the same now as they were probably in these ways, probably just beyond the caveman age. And not forgetting the lesson of how we all work together is just, that's it. That's the grounding secret sauce.
And you started out as volunteers, and then there was this LLC, but in 2013, Burning Man completed a transition and is now a nonprofit organization. Mikel, I posed this to you specifically because you're a futurist, self-professed and accurately so. But I'd love to hear from all of you. Why is a nonprofit the right vessel for the future of Burning Man? What do you see there?
Well, when we began, we formed a corporation, a limited liability corporation, certainly for protecting ourselves. But the advantage of that, it was a for-profit corporation, but we ran it as a nonprofit. We were never really interested in profiting from this. We did Burning Man because we believed in it. The advantage of that model is that it was very agile. We could turn and twist and adjust and change our course. And that was very important to our survival at that time. But now as Burning Man has grown, it's gotten much more larger, it's more stable, and we're looking at getting older. And so we had to find a model that could go beyond our lifetime, and that's why we've become a nonprofit.
Yeah, I'd say that, I think, again, it was 1997 when we became the LLC. We had to become a legal business above board, or we weren't going to, it was going to be the end. And the LLC is just the fastest thing to be able to make, so we had to do that. But at that time, we realized that that isn't true to the spirit of who we are and what was necessary. I don't know that a 501c3 is perfect, but it's the closest thing we have to being able to describe how we, meaning the broader Burning Man community, works together. So it became the thing to do once we could pull our head up from the sand in about 2001, because we were working so hard every year just to keep this thing going, because we were doubling every year for all that time. So in 2001, we started the Black Rock Arts Foundation. We couldn't use the name Burning Man because we were still this crazy outsider thing, and if we called our company Burning Man, nobody would do business with us. They would probably ostracize us. So we had to choose some other names, which was Black Rock, the Black Rock Arts Foundation, for exactly that reason. And we thought, at that point, everyone in the media was telling our story for us, and they weren't telling the true story. And so we thought, oh my gosh, we've got to get in front of that. And we thought, well, what is our true story? Well, it's art, and it's people. So let's really emphasize the art, the civic arts, and the beautiful, majestic art, large art that's happening at Burning Man. So we made our nonprofit about those things, but the vision wasn't big enough. Remember when Katrina happened?
It wasn't big enough, yeah.
Yeah, that vision was wonderful. It's still a beautiful vision, but it's not big enough, because when Katrina happened and somebody wanted to hand us $50,000 to help people demolish their homes so they get new homes built in Katrina, and of course all the Burning Man people went there because they knew how to keep things going in horrible conditions and run generators and build things and be safe and sound and make good food that people wouldn't get sick from. Somebody wanted to give us $50,000. We couldn't use our nonprofit because our vision was too small. And that was just about 3 years after we created it. So immediately we realized we weren't thinking big enough. And it wasn't until the 10 principles were really codified in everything we're doing that we then hung our hat on that, made that the Burning Man Project, and reclaimed our name at the same time, because we've always been a project and an event. We're not a festival. And then we merged the Black Rock Arts Foundation inside.
Then in 2007, we focused on all things renewable and energy.
With the Green Man theme.
Green Man theme, and there was all the projects around the man, and the man were powered by solar. And so we had all these leftover panels for this solar system after the event. And from there, we launched Black Rock Solar, the first 501c3 nonprofit solar company in the United States.
We didn't exactly launch it. It was other people's ideas. We gave them money up front so they could run, and they paid us back within 3 months because they were so successful.
And that grew and grew.
You know, I think the other thing that's really important is that somebody would come to Black Rock City and they would be feeling so compelled to take that energy back home and attempt to, just like what happened with Burners Without Borders, they would take that energy back home and see how they could actually have Burning Man within their own community. And that really was the essence of what's now the regionals and everything. And to me, that if Black Rock City ceases to exist, the energy and the principles, all of that will keep continuing to go on. You know, people will be doing events and artwork and things out in the world.
Speaking of permanence, in 2016, there's a dream that came true for Burning Man that I know was held for many years with some help from some participants. Burning Man was able to purchase the Fly Ranch. Will, you want to tell us about what that location means to you and why it's so important to the future of Burning Man?
Sure. Well, certainly it was the location of the '97 event. And I got a chance to live on the property for, I don't know, 6 months, something like that. Got to know the property. And it's the next valley. So the Black Rock Desert, there's a range, a low range of mountains, and then there's the next valley, which is Hualapai Valley. And that's a special, special place on the planet. It has really good groundwater. The Fly Ranch is in a literal oasis in the desert. We're in the Great Basin Desert, the largest desert in the 48 states. And it's dry and dusty, and then the Fly Ranch has water. It has the incredible resource of actual geysers blowing water out of the ground, and 6 artesian wells, and some of the water is cold and it's really good drinking water. So I began to feel while I was living out there in '97 that this was an important piece of land, and that if Burning Man ever wanted to do something more permanent than a 1 week, 8-day event in the desert, that a location nearby Black Rock City that we would have for our community would be the logical place that we do something like that. Because it has a lot of, again, the elements that I consider to be paramount to making the event successful, and that's location. It's the location of the place, the pilgrimage that you need to make to go there. So we purchased the land. You know, it was a wonderful gift that the donors made by donating the money to allow the Burning Man community to have this place. I think that's the spirit of it. The donations were made without any attachments. It was here's the money to buy the place, and we bought it, and they didn't gain anything by it, except that we now, all of us, have this incredible location in northern Nevada. And so over the years, 20 years went by, and we made all kinds of plans, building this and that, and programming and all of that. And then the reality of actually having it hit us like a sledgehammer. We're festival event producers, you know, or we're event producers. Sorry, I used the term festival.
It just slips out sometimes.
We're event producers, and we're not landowners. We don't know how to do that. So instead of rushing in and building a whatever, the idea was that we'd study the land for a year, and we brought in Dr. Lisa Sheely, a botanist, basically, to live on the land and do an inventory of the flora and fauna there. And oh my goodness, I mean, I recognized like 3 plants, you know, greasewood, rabbit brush, and sage. She identified 120 different plants. I knew about maybe 6 birds that I was familiar with. There's 140 different birds that come through it. All kinds of animals. She put cameras up and got all kinds of great pictures of bobcats and silly rabbits and all of that. It was just amazing. So what we began to realize is that we were getting involved with a piece of Mother Nature that was so much more diverse and so much of a delicate ecosystem that the best thing that we could do is not screw it up, right? So that's the first thing that we learned, I think, in the first couple of years. There are portions of the property, though, that would sustain our intrusion, and we're beginning to look at that. And what's truly exciting is this next year, 2020, the Land Art Generator Initiative begins, and we will be taking in proposals to build art that makes energy. It's sustainable, it's renewable, and it's beautiful. And for me, it makes me feel so proud that this would be our first real initiative on that property. And again, the words of sustainable and renewable keep coming up for me. Burning Man, the culture, has shown me that we can change the bigger dominant culture that we call the default world, that we can change that. And clearly, if we look at climatologists, the science that's going on about how this dominant culture is changing the earth, we need to do some stuff right now to experiment with new ways of being harmonious with the land. And so here we have this 5 square mile piece of land that has ample water. It has golden eagles and kestrels and red-tailed hawks. And we were camped out on Fly recently, and a pronghorn young buck just walks right into camp and looks us in the eye. So those kinds of experiences are there, the kind of experiences with Mother Nature that you don't get in Oakland. Okay? That's why I live up there, because we have a chance to create a new way of living on the planet, and the Fly Ranch could be the crucible for that. And the Laggy program that's starting this year is the first seed that we're planting in that direction.
Fantastic. Oakland, here we are in Oakland, and we're at this, I don't know if you've gotten to see the exhibition yet or if you're seeing it after, but this is an exhibition that's moved from the Smithsonian. It was actually the Nevada Museum first, and then the Smithsonian. It's art and history of Burning Man, and the Cincinnati Museum in Ohio, and now here it is in the Bay Area. And some of these people might have been more aware of Burning Man than in other parts of the world. Is there anything about seeing it come home to here and seeing it in a museum? What's that like?
Oh my God, it's very strange seeing your life behind a glass case. I'm just saying. No, we're not dead yet.
I thought, yeah.
But it feels really good. I mean, it is kind of strange. At least for myself, I hope that when somebody looks at the exhibit, they become curious as to what are these people doing? Why did they do that? Why? Just the why that would spur the questions. It just says that we can go anywhere with this. But I think there will be some things that are missing. Those that have actually been on the playa that were in whiteouts, or you had to make sure that you actually knew your neighbor so you could work with your neighbor. Those things may not come across, and they may never come across within any kind of a museum. But at least I hope that it actually tells a little bit of the story.
I was a little nervous of it coming back to Oakland because so much of what's in those walls over there are things that were created by people that are here. They're in San Francisco or Oakland. And Burning Man happened so fast and furiously and so unexpectedly that we never documented. So there's a lot of patches in there that don't have the names of the artists, and they might be in this room here right now. So if your patch is in there and it doesn't have your name on it, give it to us and we'll get it corrected. But we've had some volunteers that are right here in the audience today help us try to research those names and get them on there. And so I was a little nervous that way.
Makes sense.
I just have a funny observation. There's a prankster irreverence thing that goes back to our roots. We were talking about this backstage. And somehow putting our artifacts in a museum kind of takes that out of it. So I do go through the museum looking at it in a different way because of that, where when you see the stuff on the playa, it just feels different. So there is that for me, you know.
We talked a little bit about sustainability in terms of Fly Ranch, but what about Black Rock City? We're talking about a place where we truck a lot of resources out to the middle of nowhere. We burn a giant figure. And the conversation has come up a lot recently about the sustainability of that act. But I think there's been some announcement of some initiatives to address some concerns around that because we care. Harley, you want to tell us a little bit about some of that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we've always sort of been good stewards and environmentally conscious of the Black Rock Desert. Admittedly, in the beginning, just for survival. If we weren't, we wouldn't have gotten another permit. But very quickly, we saw the beauty of the place. And like so many, I spent every weekend up there learning how to mitigate our burn scars from years past once 1998 happened, so that we cleared up the playa. So we've always been very conscious. Again, in 1998 and 1999, we started Recycle Camp, Earth Guardians. I went to Oregon Country Fair and saw that they had Kidsville, and I started Kidsville when I came back, which to me is sustainability as well. Teach our children and move this on.
Can't have a city without kids.
Yeah, and Alternative Energy Zone also came from there. Those are ideas that I seeded back in 1998 and 99. So it's been with us for a long time. Green Man theme, of course, as Mikel brought up. But now we're actually poised with the purchase of Fly, with the new initiative we just put out, and I had to write it down because I didn't write it. And brilliant people. We have some brilliant people working with us now as employees and staff and just as volunteers, Black Rock Labs. The 2030 Environmental Sustainability Directive, which is extremely ambitious in 10 years, not just becoming carbon neutral, but carbon negative. I don't know if we can do it, but if anybody could do it, we could do it.
Right.
And the reason we could do it is because of the kinds of learnings we talked about, because we're so willing to try it and fail and learn and do it again. And we bring these great minds together for a week. Like all these people coming around the globe are there together for a week. So although, for sure, the travel to Black Rock City is the most environmentally impactful, as you brought up, and burning things doesn't resonate very well when you just think about it. But if we do all the other mitigation and become like a role model, like cutting edge of trying new technology with Laggy, we can get in front of this and be poised to be there to support others, to show how it can be done, and to actually get in front of all of this. It's a really impressive moment we're in right now.
Yeah, we could actually be a model for how other municipalities throughout the world deal with their carbon footprint and so on. And certainly it's more than timely. So the new initiative that we have is really a great model, not just for us, but for everyone.
Mikel?
There's a perspective that I have too about this. The Burning Man events that people attend, they become very aware of their impact. There's no trash cans out there. You have to haul your own trash away. You have to bring everything you need to survive. We pick up everything before we leave. And I think this teaches people about their impact on the earth. And they take what they learn at Burning Man and they take that out into the community. They become aware of their place in a consumer society and how much we're gobbling up the resources of the planet. And as a teaching device, Burning Man is so important. They take that with them when they go home. And if we can take that lesson that's taught out there and teach 200,000 people, 300,000 people, I think that far outweighs our cost of our carbon footprint out there. And we're only going to improve that.
It isn't, leave no trace has been our motto for so many years, but now we're changing it to leave a positive trace.
Yeah.
Let's move this forward. Let's extend this conversation.
But lest any of you fans of burning out there worry, it's right there in our mission. We will always burn the man.
Oh, yes. Yes.
So the founding of the nonprofit was really about looking at Burning Man's future and preparing for that, but I don't think anything quite had us prepared to lose Larry Harvey 2 years ago. And I wanted to ask how his ideas and vision still inspire you today, and has his death changed anything about how you work together with each other?
He's still around. He's sitting over there, smoking a cigarette, He a very unique, wonderful man that I sort of kiddingly call him our Frankenstein, because he really did pull us to the desert, to something very special. He had a twinkle in his eye, He was the original, trickster as well. The fact that he could actually get us to do crazy shows in Somart and do crazy shows on the playa and try things, being able to take a leap of faith that we're going to land. And he's still around. I still hear him over my shoulder.
Larry has also left us with a large body of his writings and his interviews that we can draw upon in the future, and I think that will be very important.
Yeah.
So Larry's contribution to us, we all work together equally. There was no hierarchy with us, the six of us. It's always been like that. We had to work out how to work together. That took many years, but it was always very equal. And we each, as I talked about before, the group dynamics had a different role. And his was to look around the room, hear everything that's being said, and say, oh, that's this. And everyone would go, yeah, that's right. And then we'd all agree on that. And then that became a brick, and that you could start building a foundation. And that was his role. And so I think that's going to be hard to replace. I think the foundation is strong, though. It's already been built. And we are at the stage where it's necessary, and we're all doing it. We're all moving back and letting more young people come in and do this and take it to the next level. And we definitely have given a strong foundation to the organization, meaning the community at large. Larry will be lost in the long run in that venue, but I think we're fine.
Yeah.
I think we're fine.
Larry was one of the most quirkiest, eccentric, brilliant visionaries that I had ever met. The guy, he lived in culture, he lived in San Francisco, but his life was totally outside of culture. I mean, he just lived life his own way. I'll never forget the time when we were boarding an airplane and they required a driver's license to get a ticket, and he didn't have a driver's license. So he produced a Time magazine article with his picture in it, and it got him on the plane. It was remarkable. So what I've taken on in his absence, and he's not absent, his spirit is alive. He's as vibrant and as present and as real as he's ever been. But it's allowed me to become empowered to be as eccentric as I can be. and I'm going to carry on his spirit by being that.
I have to tell a story when I first met Larry. We had this conversation. He said he'd burn this thing on the beach and everything. And I said, okay, fine, send me a video. So he sent me this videotape, and it was really dark, and I saw a lot of fire, and I couldn't figure out what the hell these people were doing. So I called him up, and I was really in a pissy mood. So I snobbishly said, so do you do this on a solstice or an equinox? And he went, no. I said, I have no time for you. That was 1990. In 91, they had the man on a barge
At Fort Mason.
And I showed up. Louis Brill, rest his soul, invited me to come. And I didn't know what these people were doing, because they were standing there holding a rope. I'm going, oh, I'm going to stand over here because I don't want to even get involved. And they started pulling up the man, and something in me really clicked. It told me subconsciously that I had to go to the desert. I couldn't even verbalize it. Thank you, Larry Harvey.
Well, so what about beyond your lifetimes? What do you see, other than the things that we've talked about, in the future of Burning Man and the succession beyond you? What's it going to do in the world?
Well, we're in a really critical time on the planet Earth. I mean, scientists are calling this the 6th great extinction. So human beings need to figure out how to live in harmony, renewable, sustainable on the planet. And I think that the Burning Man community can take the lead in that. Our dominant culture is fragile. They're turning off the power in California because of wildfires. And I mean, there's stuff going on right now that, if they escalate just a little bit, all of a sudden we're going to be camped out together like at Burning Man, right?
But we're really good at that.
And we are good at that. And I think those are the skills that are going to be important 20 years from now. So, I'm trying to look into the future, which you can't really do. And so the question is kind of loaded.
Yep.
But I see the Burning Man community growing. And I think that the new emphasis should be on sustainable, renewable, looking at the plan for the future for energy and all of that. I think we could take the lead in that and show the world how to live in harmony on the earth. That's really our home.
Community, too, is something that the world can learn from us, how to live together. Very diverse people can get along and work together. I think that's really important.
And this is going to sound so cookie cutter, but really, when you look at the kids that go to Burning Man and you see what their values are and what their tolerance levels are and what matters to them, we're making a good impact. We really are.
I hope that what we've started and we pass on to people, that people will remember it and maybe give them a little glimpse in something that they could have faith in themselves to actually take a step into, the unknown, which is what we were definitely doing.
Certainly an experiment for community resiliency. My husband, Tom Price, is in the audience today. He likes to say that when the big one hits in San Francisco, who's going to be out on the corners handing out pancakes in the morning? It's the burners.
Right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to make sure these folks hear today? Or should we maybe move to some questions?
I don't know that we can add anything.
Questions?
Questions?
I think we have microphones for the questions.
Lights up
Is that
a little?
right? Bring up the lights a little, maybe. I hope we're right on timing here. Thank you.
Ah,
I saw one hand somewhere over here, and now I can see that our friends are here.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. How about right here?
So for me, Burning Man changed when technology discovered the internet. And for many years, it was what happened at Burning Man stayed at Burning Man. And then suddenly, what happened at Burning Man was out everywhere. And so what are your thoughts about the future of Burning Man and technology?
Well, it's unavoidable. What you just talked about actually happened to everything, not just Burning Man.
Yeah.
So you try to swim in that water. We're actually private in many ways. We have a whole strategy in how we deal with the culture. As a cultural leader, it's important to, I think, have that strategy, and I'm glad that we do. I think it's important. The good side of it is that it proliferates the ideals and the power of the cultural change that we represent. The bad thing is that there's a lot of fake news out there. People can make up stories and all of that, and that happens all the time. So, I think that people have changed in the way they take in information and accept it because of the changes in technology. And I don't think Burning Man is separate from that. I think, are you asking us to be different than the rest of humanity and its relationship to technology? Is that what you're pointing at? And if that is, how do we do that?
So you can either lead or follow.
Yeah, and I like to think we're leaders.
Yes, I think we're leading. As someone whose early career was in Silicon Valley, and of course I invited all my friends, sorry about that. But we can use technology to spread the ideals and the principles of Burning Man, and I think that's really important, and we can use that. And we adapt too. We always need to be able to adapt and change and evolve, and that's important.
I mean, you know, nothing's in private anymore. People walk around with phones and take pictures of everything and post it immediately on social media and stuff. Is that what you're talking about as far as
Any more
change?
questions?
That just went on social media.
So playing off of that is the conversation about money and its influence, and of course the tech industry and the bucket list and all of that. As an artist, I've been bringing big and small art out there since 2005. And having actually played both sides of that fence, done it all on my own, worked with a big team, done the whole thing, and then recently done some very big, well-funded projects, I'm interested in your take on how we are expanding the culture into those who really have power on the planet and carry that power wisely and spread that wisdom through that culture, which is heavily divorced from most of our day-to-day lives.
Is that a question?
Well,
I'm interested in your take on how money influences the culture of Burning Man and how Burning Man's culture is influencing the culture of money.
Well, that's a challenge. The fact that we are bringing people of means, technologists to the event has the potential to change them. So we need to find ways to teach them to understand our culture and adapt to that. And I think if we can teach those people how to be citizens of Black Rock City, how to be citizens, good citizens and stewards of the planet, then we will have won that issue.
We're popping up in really surprising places. We're working with the Institute of Peace in Washington, D.C. We've brought, 40 mayors to Black Rock City in ways that are impactful, where they're going back to their cities and trying to embrace the 10 principles, however it works for them. We've done mixers in the Eisenhower building for senators and congressmen, and they can't come, but their staffs are all burners. We are really having a really large influence internationally. Marianne Goodell, our CEO, was invited, who wanted to be here today, by the way. She couldn't be here. She's, of course, our other founder. Spoke at ING Bank, which just seemed like, what? Why are we speaking at ING Bank? Because they're curious about our culture, because they want to make their culture inside their business one that people want to, so people enjoy going to work. We have people that have been inspired by Burning Man that are now making new technology tools that are all about improving the way people work together day to day, because we spend so many hours working. Why can't Burning Man happen all the time? We all know that by Burning Man it's like falling apart by Monday and Tuesday. Like it's time for it to be over. But we should take that spirit and not just have it in our homes and in our communities when we go back, but why not in our workplace? That's starting to happen. These things are starting to become real because of people's experience at the event and because of their influence, because of their station in life. We are really seeing very positive change. I've just touched the iceberg on the kind of impact we're having.
You know, an example that is part of our 10 principles is the decommodification idea. And you can come to Burning Man. Look, we live in a capitalistic world where money is the cornerstone of how we interact with each other. I mean, everything has a value. It's part of the way we're trained. It's in our inner voice, all of that. And you can go to Burning Man and not have a wallet, not spend any money. You can be there for a whole week. So at least for a little bit of time in your life, you've learned how to live without that particular cornerstone, some would call it evil, that we call money. And that's a way of life for a week that could be a way of life. You may go back after not using money for a week and maybe make something and trade with it or use it as a gift. You might bring that to your life outside of Burning Man. I hope that you all do. Gifting is one of the great principles that we have. And it's in that way, those little ways, that will change the world.
Funny thing, a few years ago, I got invited to a panel called The Future of Money. And we were up there, about 6 of us. I had Barclays Bank on one side and Bank of America on the other. I don't know how I got on this panel. And of course, they're figuring out how to capitalize their profit. And I think I made an interesting point. I said, in the future, the value of money will depend on who is spending it. And it really caught them by surprise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I saw a couple of hands on this side, yeah.
So going back to the money thing, I've never been to Burning Man. I have good friends who have been a lot. But when I thought about trying to go, I feel like I don't personally have the resources to go. And so I wanted to bring like diversity into it and ask how like the lower socioeconomic strata can be included in this. Is that making sense as a question?
You're basically saying that the ticket price and the cost of going to Burning Man excludes a certain level of our culture.
The cost of being away from, you know, your source of income for a week,
right,
of producing something to contribute. Yeah, the ticket price itself. I know there's scholarships. The fact that I don't see a lot of color in the room. All those things worry me a little bit about who, I mean, you're talking about the higher, you know, the banks and the governments and everything, and this is like a group that's on top, but how can we touch the lives of people who are not so powerful and wealthy?
These are all issues that we are concerned with, and we have programs that we're working on, certainly our low-income ticket program. And also the fact that Burning Man is more than just the event in the desert. There are Burning Man type of events that are happening in local communities that are working with people in local areas. And so you can participate in Burning Man in many different ways and in many different places.
Yeah, that would be my answer to that question as well. You don't have to go to Burning Man to get the Burning Man experience anymore. There was a time when you had to. And it doesn't really address the issue that it is expensive to go to Burning Man, and it does require a lot of resources. It's something we just simply struggle with. We actually, our ticket prices are like really low for actually how much it costs to make it. Like, it's just a real delicate balancing act. I will say that if you are intent on going, you will find a way. That's the way this community works. It just happens like that. And it doesn't have to be expensive to get the camping equipment to actually go. The ticket price can be the highest or the most difficult thing. And I know that sounds vague. And we are always working on these kinds of issues. We have since day one, actually. Back when people would drive by the little trailer and just wave at us as they drove by and didn't give us the $32 it took to get into Burning Man that year. So it is very challenging. And I'm very heartened that we have grown beyond the boundaries of that event in the desert. I will say on the other diversity issue of, you know, there's a lot of white people in this room, there's not a lot of people of color in this room. I was just looking at pictures of 1998. We had an event in our office, and there was the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence there. There were some gender fluid people there. That was before there was a name for it. There were brown skinned people there. And not in the proportions you'd want to see. And so they've always been there, and it's always been an issue. And it's not something that we're just starting to talk about now. We've been talking about this on really our whole
one of the
existence.
From the beginning, yeah.
But we really ramped up that conversation in the course of the last 2 years. If you look at our blog posts, you're going to see a lot of blog posts starting about 2 years ago that start to address our concerns. And we are really actively ramping up all of our activities in all fronts, whether it's internally, just from our board, down to the trainings for our staff in diversity and inclusion, reading the books and all of that. But that's, like, we're not a top-down organization. We're doing that because that's the right thing to do. We are a grassroots organization, so we're trying to find the ways now to host those conversations. We've been hosting them for years at our European Leadership Summit, at our other conferences. There's always conversations about this. And now we really feel like, I'm actually so excited about it. I feel like finally, like, unless the community wants it, we don't have a lot of control over the community. The community has to be the people that are driving it. Now that they're driving this conversation, we are so behind taking it to the next level and trying to strike the right balance and perhaps even be, a leadership model that other people might want to follow. We really consider ourselves at the heart to be a learning institution, not an event in the desert. We're all about teaching leadership and learning. So thank you for the question. It's a difficult one, and there's not a good answer.
Do we have time for some more?
Sure.
Okay.
Go to
Yes.
Hi, thank you guys. I've been interested in the conversation, and one of the sort of themes that I've heard coming through it is permanence. And I think that there's a little bit of inherent tension between one of the things that I really like about the event, one of the things I found very interesting about the event, which is ephemerality. You know, you can build the grandest thing out here as long as you know that the next week there's going to be nothing but 400 miles of dust. You can be whoever you want to be, but only for this one blink of time. So I'm wondering how you balance those things as you're moving into a sort of more permanent mode for the event, for the culture.
That's a good one.
Go out and look in the gallery.
You know, what's fascinating to me is that you can have 80,000 people looking at one work of art, and each person will see it differently within themselves, and they'll take a little bit away. I love the ephemerality because if we set something on fire, it's gone. But it still lives on in your memory. And I love that. Everybody's going to have their own story about what that thing was for them.
Yeah, the idea of permanence is very relative.
It's always
Right.
been about temporality.
Is it a 10,000-year permanence or a 100,000-year permanence? Or is it a 1 week? You know, those are all interesting in our narrow human vision, which is a lifetime. You know, we see permanence differently. We talk about leave no trace, but if the Egyptians didn't leave the pyramids, we would not be, enriched by an incredible heritage that's 6,000 years old. So it's kind of interesting to me. I think the idea of leaving a positive trace is an interesting one. And that's the way I look at the Fly Ranch, as a place where we might actually build something at some point.
It's a beginning.
Yeah, and I want to be really careful. I think we should all be really careful with everything we do on the planet right now. We need to be in harmony. It needs to be sustainable and renewable. Those are the key elements for the future of mankind on the planet. So that needs to come into our idea of permanence and what we're doing, outside of a ephemeral Black Rock City. I'm glad you used the word ephemeral. It's in the title of my first book.
Don't plug your book. So, this brings me back to the Burning Man project. We don't know where this thing is going. We didn't know when we started, and we don't know now. And it always keeps changing, whether it's the introduction of technology and how that affects us. We've been doing a lot of studying and understanding of temporary for 30 some odd years, and now it's just prudent and it makes sense to talk about some permanence. Where that's going to lead us, I don't know, but I don't think it changes our learnings about temporary. It's just more.
Let's see. Who else? Got one up in the back. I think I know that guy.
Oh, great. Hello? The question that was asked earlier about the people that attend the event touched on the thing that I wanted to ask, which is not about the event, but it's about the four of you. The genius in retrospect, that Burning Man, the organization of putting the event on has been that you, as you said, you haven't led. You've sort of, as things have opened up in front, steered from behind. You've allowed the community to point the direction forward and then encourage certain things. The question I have for you is, people obviously feel very, very strongly about this event. It makes up an enormous part of their lives. I've never encountered anything that people have been so passionate about. And people have strong opinions about how the event should be held, which they share with you in various ways that are constructive and not constructive.
Yeah, they do.
And I'm wondering, what has the experience been like to spend your entire adult life having tens of thousands of people tell you exactly what you're screwing up about the thing that they care about the most in the world?
Well, you have to be open to listen to it, and acknowledge, how some people feel,
Yeah, in the face of great criticism, I think what was even stronger is seeing the positive change that was going on in the community and the positive effect it was having on culture. I think if you very deeply know that you're doing what's right, then external criticism, it tempers it. You don't hear it so loudly. You use it as a tool to change for the better. But I think all of us knew early on that what we were doing was important, and that it would sustain us and sustain the community
after we're
to
gone.
go forward. Yeah. Is that?
You also have to be able to and willing to read 2,000 pages of participant feedback.
Yeah.
I think that burden's been one of the greatest challenges of my life.
I can't begin to imagine what that is like now, the question is, because you all handle it with such grace and should be congratulated and thanked for it. Thank you. Hold the stage.
Thank you.
Well, if it wasn't for those that go to the event, the burners, it would just be a camping trip in the desert, except burning a 40-foot wooden figure while we're camping.
Do we have time for maybe one
Time.
more? Sure. Okay. I see a hand right here in the middle.
There's two more. Yeah.
We do have two more hands. Probably there's a lot of burning questions in here.
Yeah, I also wanted to thank you deeply, deeply, deeply. As an old hippie, this is my yearly regeneration that recharges me for the year. And this next year will be my 13th year, which will mean it's my burn mitzvah. And I look forward to doing a performance art piece about that. And I too was concerned during this past year, the news I had heard about the BLM. And although, I'm so pleased to hear that it's resolving well, though there is that ongoing question. Is there any chance that it can be on public land someplace?
Private land? Private land, you mean?
Private land.
Well,
So-
first of all, there's no area that large where there is nothing to burn except us in the country. So the location that we have there is the place that nobody ever wanted when the country was settled. So it by default ended up on private land. But the challenge is Black Rock City is so large now, there's no place that we can do an event of that scale.
There's another thing that we're not thinking of, and that is you think, okay, let's do it on private land, and it's easy, right? Well, the problem is you're in a county, so the jurisdiction changes. So instead of dealing with the federal government, which we already have almost a 30-year track record with, we're now dealing with a county that has their own rules and regulations, and it just shifts the focus of what we would need to comply with. It might even make it more difficult in many ways. So we have a good track record of doing it where we are. The place is magic, and as Michael said, it's certainly large enough for our event. And I think we want to continue doing it there as long as we possibly can.
we also have the benefit of being able to look at other events that are sprung from our loins, that are like, a good example would be Africa Burn, that is on private land, and see the problems that they're facing. There are some advantages and there's some disadvantages. So there's pros and cons to everything.
Can we grab this one last question and then we'll wrap up?
Thank you, and thank you all. My question is socially and culturally. When I'm asked in my span of 17 years attending, what's the biggest change I've noticed? My answer, similar to what was said earlier, is the lights are better. And so I want to know from you, socially and culturally, what are the biggest changes that you've noticed? What are the biggest social and cultural hurdles that you've had to overcome? And just speaking to that as a culture and a society that we're growing and evolving into.
Besides the large numbers of people that keep coming every year.
Right, besides just the numbers. And how the numbers have maybe impacted that from your eyes.
Well, every year we learn something. What's interesting about doing the event is like we have this one time in the course of our calendar to sort of get it right. But what we're doing right now is we're actually, chewing on what the last year was and how do we change something? How do we make it work better? How do we make it more inclusive or open for people as well?
For me, things have changed. It used to be tents and tarps, and now it's RVs and motorhomes, right? I mean, that certainly changed. It used to be those lights that you break fluorescent lights, and then it became L-wire, and then it was LED lights, and now it's all kinds of incredible lighting. So things have changed, but that's just surface stuff. Mm-hmm. What I hold on to is what hasn't changed. And that's the incredible example of human unconditional love and the art spirit that has been the same since the beginning of Burning Man, and it's in full blossom today. And that hasn't changed. As long as that doesn't change, everything else can change and it won't matter.
Well said.
Nicely said, nicely said.
We really have to thank the museum for both hosting the exhibit and for having us here today. And I want to thank all of you for the gifts that you've brought to Black Rock City and to Burning Man, or the things that you will bring maybe in the future. Some people in this room have been volunteering with this particular exhibition as docents and helping people to enjoy it. So thank you for all your contributions to the culture. And thanks so much to our cultural founders for being here today. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.